Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the November 24th meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education. At 4:30 today, we had a work session about proposed amendments to the legislative agenda, and then we received an update on the district's communications efforts. Before we go into our moment of silence, this is the week of Thanksgiving, and sometimes we forget, but there's always something that we can be thankful for. So if you would just focus on that, we'll do our moment of silence, and then we will stand for the pledge to be led by the students from Manual and Eastern High School, and then Ms. Duncan will read our vision statement. So if you could think of one thing that you're thankful for, let's have our moment of silence. Thank you. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Duncan, our vision statement, please.
Well, our vision is for all JCBS students to graduate prepared to reach their full potential and contribute to society throughout life.
Thank you so much. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of November 10th? Mr. Hadaway, second. Mr. Brady, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Recognitions and resolutions, Ms. Robinson.
Dr. Hargens, Board Chair Diane Porter, and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Tonight we are so proud to recognize JCPS students who have set high standards of academic excellence for students in the district and across the nation. We began with the recognition of DuPont Manual High School students for winning the National Journalism Quiz Bowl competitions. Student team members Kenzie Ball, Shay Dobson, Jack Grossman, and Joshua Swoboda won the National Journalism Quiz Bowl on April the 12th at the Journalism Education Association, National Scholastic Press Association Spring National High School Journalism Convention that was held in San Diego. This month, DuPont Manual High School won the second consecutive National Journalism Quiz Bowl competition. The returning champions entered 2 teams in the Journalism Quiz Bowl at the Fall Convention, which was held in Washington, D.C. The teams competed against more than 20 teams from across the nation. The winning team members from DuPont Manual were Joshua Swoboda, Virginia Call, Farron Vaughn, and Vanessa Gregorchak. The National Journalism Quiz Bowl competition involves 4-member student teams testing their knowledge on current events, pop culture, journalism, and civics. Board Chair Diane Porter, please come forward and congratulate the DuPont Manual High School students. Joining in the recognition is teacher Liz Palmer and Principal Jerry Mays. We would also, at this time, like to ask all parents of these outstanding students to please stand and be recognized. Next, we have the honor of recognizing Eastern High School students Madeline Wade, William Powers, and Chase Peterson for earning top scores on the High School of Business exam. Madeline earned the highest score in the nation on the Principles of Marketing section, William scored the third highest score on the Principal of Business section, and Chase earned the third highest score in leadership. The students competed against approximately 4,500 students from across the nation on the rigorous exam, which is administered by the Marketing and Business Administration Research and Curriculum Center, a national accelerated business administration program. The program enhances the knowledge and skills of students and prepares them to be great leaders so they graduate employable, productive, and promotable in the world of business. Board member Debbie Westland, please come forward to extend congratulations to the Eastern High School students. Joining in the recognition is their teacher, Jody Charleston. We also like to ask that the parents of these outstanding students please stand and be recognized. Dr. Hargens and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this concludes our recognitions for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there a motion to receive the recognitions? Mr. Brady, second by Ms. Westland. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. At this time, we give you an opportunity to go home, and I usually say homework, but give you an opportunity to go home, and or else you're with us for the rest of the evening. So thank you. We are very proud of you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and keep up the good work. Thank you. We are going to move on to the consent calendar and the superintendent's report. After Dr. Hargens' report, we do have one tie bid, and then I will ask if there are any items to be pulled down from the consent calendar. Dr. Hargens.
Thank you, Chair Porter, members of the board. It's my pleasure to call to your attention a few items of special interest. I would like to make a correction in the recommendation tonight for the Board of Education to accept funding totaling $150,000 from Norton Healthcare through a grant from the James R. Petersdorf Fund to support a football concussion prevention assessment and treatment program. That's item 5K9. The grant funds will be used to purchase 235, not 250, four-star football helmets. At the November 20th, 2014 Louisville Metro Council meeting at City Hall, Councilman David James presented a proclamation in honor of Cochran Elementary School Principal Tim Foster. A special thank you to Councilman James for recognizing Principal Foster and his staff. Chair Porter, Dean Larson, and I were honored to be there with the principal and his staff. The 15th District PTA Clothing Assistance Program held a winter clothing drive. There were 5,317 articles of clothing donated from JCPS employees and students. In order for children to learn, they must have their basic needs met. One of the most basic needs is clothing. I would like to thank the schools and employees for their generosity. The 15th District PTA, I'll also do a commercial, is in need of volunteers to help fill orders on site and to hang clothes. We believe we will help 6,000 families from the beginning of this school year. Families may contact the School Family Resource Coordinator to make an appointment. Data is important. Reducing suspensions is a leading indicator to increased achievement. The number of suspensions is down in elementary and high schools, but suspensions are up in middle schools. To date, 57 schools have a fewer number of suspensions this year than through the same time last year. You can see the results from one school or schools where suspensions are down. To date, again, 57 schools have fewer number of suspensions. So we're working to link this data to the data dashboard so that everyone can have access to it. And we have interventions in place, school response teams, positive action centers, positive behavior intervention support. And of course, we monitor suspensions weekly, and we'll bring updates to the board. Last work session, we did a session on the third grade reading pledge and the number of third graders and the goal of having all third graders read by third grade. A board member asked how many students are not reading at grade level or aren't proficient or better. It's 3,981 students. That's the number of third graders. So that's really 53.3% of our third graders that are not at the proficient level, and those are the third graders we have to plan for. So we do have interventions in place. Our teachers work in professional learning communities. We are working to improve teacher quality and naming and claiming every student. So students are placed in interventions that support their reading and creating more effective learning environments. As I promised in each of my reports, I'll give you state audit progress updates. You remember at the last meeting, the board approved the salary review. And also as a reminder, there is an RFP out for internal audit services that will maintain independence and report regularly to the board, and that will work from an audit plan. We hope to have a contract to be brought forward to the board approval at the December 15th board meeting. On tonight's agenda is a request for approval to name an athletic field at No Middle School after Mr. Sam Moore. Principal Jan McDowell is here tonight as Mr. Moore is unable to attend due to poor health, but we appreciate Principal McDowell being here. And as Ms. Porter did, I'd like to wish all a safe and happy Thanksgiving holiday. Chair Porter, at this time, I recommend the consent calendar for the board's consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Harkins. We'll do the tie bid, and then I'll come back to you, Ms. Haddad, please.
Okay, thank you. Item 106 on bid ID 6978 for electrical supplies and lighting line item. This is one draw for one item, and the award is awarded to. Let's see if I can pull it out. AM Electric.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Haddad.
I'd like to bring down N.
N.
Yeah.
Okay. Other items, Mr. Brady?
I'd like to bring down item K.9, item P, and item Q.
After you did K9, what was after before Q?
Item P as in Paul and Q as in Queen.
Thank you. Other items? Ms. Duncan?
K7.
Other items? Okay, starting at the top, K7, the acceptance of additional funding for the Kentucky Governor's Office for Everyone Reads Nurses Initiative. Ms. Duncan?
Just a brief question on that. This amount is a couple $100,000 more than what we had approved earlier. Does that mean that we have hired more nurses and we have placed more nurses, or what does that amount mean for us?
Oh, Ms. Duncan, with the dollars that we received, we were able to purchase more nurses, I believe. I have to check exactly where that is, and a lot of it went toward additional supplies for the nurses that we had, because we had a discrepancy there where we needed to fill supply lists for them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next item is K9, acceptance of funding from Norton Healthcare for activities and athletics. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make a couple of comments regarding this particular issue. First of all, I think it's fantastic that we're getting a grant to address some of the concussion issues that we might have in the district regarding football. I know that, as my colleagues know, that I've had a concern about this since even before becoming sworn in on the board, and and it's nice to see the district making progress on this. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Tad Seifert at Norton Healthcare for consulting with the district on this as well. All that being said, I need to request that this item be voted on separately because I am an employee of Norton Healthcare and I will need to abstain from this vote even though I do support it.
Okay, thank you. The next item is item N, the approval to name the athletic field at No Middle School, the Sammy Moore Athletic Field. Ms. Haddad.
Yes, I think this is great to do this for Mr. Moore. He was at No Middle School when my daughter was many years ago, and the kids loved him. He was there over 40 years, and just a wonderful role model for kids. I was hoping he could make it tonight because he was such a wonderful person and made a great difference on a lot of kids' lives. So I'm glad this is really appropriate to be named it for him.
Thank you. Mr. Hathaway.
I'd like to comment on this item too. I echo what Ms. Haddad said because I had the privilege of working with Sammy when I was with the Louisville Metro Parks, and his love for kids that I saw at Southwick Community Center was unparalleled, and he is a dedicated public servant and always looking out for the children of our community, and this is really exciting to see that this happened at a school that I went to as well, so congratulations, and if Ms. McDowell will share our sentiments with him when she gets a chance, appreciate that.
And perhaps, because he's not here, perhaps we can make arrangements to take this recommendation and all the board members sign it, and then maybe we could send it to him since he's unable to be here tonight, just to let him know how much we appreciate his hard work. Ms. Haddad.
And I'd like to know when the dedication is going to be so we could be there if we wanted to be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item that we pulled down is P, the acceptance of the Professional Growth and Effectiveness Systems Certified Evaluation Plan for the first submission and reading. Mr. Brady.
I just want to one more time reiterate the fact that the administration and the district, as well as the teachers union, have worked very closely on this particular item, and it's nice to see this as what I consider a successful project. And I want to congratulate all those, both on JCTA's side as well as the administration side, for coming together and being able to work and push this this initiative together. I do want to make one particular issue, just food for thought. When we are considering other things that would take time for our teachers to do, if we consider the fact that our teachers' time is also pretty jam-packed as it is, it's their time is I think we're squeezing more and more onto their plate, and this is another example of that, though a much needed thing that needs to happen. But I just want us to think about that and have that in the back of our minds as we make other we consider that before we make other demands of their time. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item that was pulled down is item Q, the approval of amendment to JCPS 2015 legislative agenda. Mr. Brady.
Again, thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to say thanks and to Jonathan Lowe for working on this. I know that we had some lively discussion about this particular issue at our last meeting. Thank you for going back, looking at the language of this, and being able to more narrow the confines of this. I also like the fact that we're looking at targeting schools that are in that low as 25%. I think that's something important, as well as defining that as an issue for a first-class city such as Louisville. I know that we've had some issues, not issues, but questions rather, from other districts as to why we're only doing this for Louisville. This is the example of local government trying to govern locally, and it's something that I think that the community should be aware of. I also understand that there may be legislation that also might be targeted to Jefferson County locally here in the near future, but that is coming from outside of the district and outside of the county even. So I want you to think about that when you see those particular bills being presented, and the fact that you're looking at, there are people out there who are looking to taking local government away from you, and they're trying to assert that authority with their own. So this is an example of us trying to govern here locally, and just something that I just want to reiterate with that.
Thank you. Ms. Duncan.
I'd like to also comment on this item. Well, I really would like for Dr. Hargens, if you could, give us, take us through the scenario of what this will look like when there is a vacancy in a school that is in the 25 percentile range. What would the process look like for us?
Sure, and again, this is a legislative agenda, so this is a priority. It's not really the legislation, so that's an important distinction. But what we've written says when a vacancy occurs in the lowest quartile school, that we would solicit feedback from the SBDM and from the stakeholders about what they think that they needed. I would work to find an experienced person or someone with the skill set that matches. Then what I would do, as I do with priority schools, is convene the SBDM and talk to them about what they said they needed and what they needed, and show them the fit. And the impetus here is to try to attract experienced principals with skill sets, or principals with certain skill sets, to the right situation. So, but that's the process that would be used. So the SBDM is involved at the very beginning, stating the needs, and at the very end, when the person who's identified would be named to them.
Ms. Westland.
Thank you again for going back and giving us something that had some more parameters so we could understand exactly what you're looking for. And I think it makes sense that we do everything we can to help the lower performing schools. Certainly the leader is a real important factor, not the only factor. We also need to make sure we go in and assist those leaders in schools to help them with teacher development, with mental health counselors, which my feedback is that's going really well. Schools are getting more assistance, professional development for positive behavior. All these things are all factors in great schools, but I certainly understand the leader's important. Want to clarify something we've talked about a couple of times today, and I want to make sure it's reflected in the minutes that when a vacancy occurs, you just said that you'd work to attract the right candidates for that school. Your intention is not to unilaterally move a principal from one school to another. You would even maybe groom people, but they would apply and express an interest after you call for people to come forward who are interested. So principals who are in place don't necessarily have to move.
No, that's exactly right. We'd be asking people to step up and use their skill set to benefit our students. So you wouldn't be moved without wanting to step up to do that.
Okay. And the second thing is, we know, as you said, this is a legislative agenda and a priority. And it may go through some iterations if it passes or not. And I think that piece needs to stay in. And also, I think we all agree that SBDM consultation is something we would want to keep constant, no matter what kind of changes occur in that process, and probably bring this back to the board as the legislative session goes forward, so they're on top of what's happening with that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar except item K9? Motion by Mr. Brady, second by Ms. Haddad. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion for the consent calendar item K9, the funding from Norton Healthcare? Mr. Hathaway, second. Ms. Haddad. All those in favor? All board members except Mr. Brady, and Mr. Brady abstains?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you so much. We are now moving down to action items. There are no action items on the agenda, but under the discussion items, we have two speakers tonight, and we will take this opportunity to hear from our speakers first. First is Frances Cotton. Ms. Cotton, welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the board. At the end of 2.5 minutes, a bell will sound once. You will then have 30 seconds to finish your statement. At the end of 3 minutes, the bell will sound twice, indicating that your time is up. Thank you for being here tonight, and welcome.
I want to thank Superintendent Hargens and the board members, Board of Education members, for this opportunity to speak to you. As Diane said, I am Frances Cotton, the chairman of the Louisville League of Women Voters Education Committee. and I want to speak with you today about magnet schools. The League of Women Voters of Louisville conducted a study in 1990 of the challenges and opportunities involved with optional or magnet schools and curricula in public schools. We concluded that the purposes of optional programs in schools and public school systems should be to enhance the quality of education. We noted the importance of evaluating optional programs based on their fulfillment of school system purposes. We also noted the importance of equity goals in individual schools and in the system. The League commends the board and the superintendent for contracting with an outside evaluator, Magnet Schools of America, to conduct an extensive evaluation of the JCPS magnet schools. The League agrees that essential issues to be included in the evaluation of magnets are whether the magnet schools are diverse, promote achievement, and are magnetic. However, effects of magnet schools on equity and excellence in other JCPS schools and the school system as a whole are also crucial. MSA made many recommendations for improvement in different aspects of magnet schools, and we support most of these recommendations. The establishment of clear purposes, mission, and goals of magnet programs should be the first steps in any changes, both in individual schools and in the system as a whole. MSA recommended that a community task force with various stakeholders be convened to develop the purposes, mission, and goals of the magnet schools. The League recommends that such a community task force have advisory status. The responsibility for developing and recommending purposes, mission, goals, types of magnets, and plans lies with the superintendent and board. Ultimate approval is the responsibility of the school board. An advisory task force composed of a wide variety of stakeholders from various community groups will provide valuable input and critique of plans. The task force will continue to monitor and evaluate implementation and future developments in an advisory capacity. All magnet schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next speaker is Pat Morrell. Ms. Morrell, thank you for being here tonight.
And I'm the president, and I will continue where she left off. All magnet schools, not just traditional schools, should be reviewed and evaluated for purposes and results. Foremost, any magnet evaluation process should address diversity and equity and consider what the magnet offers that is not or should not be offered in every school. We concur with the requirement for all magnets to clarify goals and submit plans for student recruitment, curriculum, instruction, and professional development. Magnets should be terminated when evaluation so indicates. The League believes that the recommendations regarding equity and diversity merit special attention. JCPS schools vary extremely in the socioeconomic situations of their students as well as the racial percentages. Those inequalities among schools are reflected in the large gap in achievement scores. The application and selection processes of the JCPS magnet system contribute to segregation among schools. The magnet system separates students with academically advantaged and motivated families from students with families who lack the resources to choose schools or to meet the discriminating selection criteria. The inequalities can be corrected, but that requires intentionally modifying selection criteria. Selection criteria and procedures can be constructed to provide more equitable access to magnets. As MSA recommends, a lottery system is fairer than one based on previous achievement, but a lottery is not enough to ensure a diverse school population because of disproportionate self-selection by advantaged families. Other tools are needed, such as requiring equitable geographic and equitable socioeconomic representation, at every magnet school. In addition, JCPS has an obligation to reach out to parents from within schools rather than waiting for them to enter the choice process on their own. Magnet schools can enhance the quality of education in JCPS by promoting economic and ethnic diversity, providing choices of teaching strategies or curricula, meeting unmet student needs, and serving as pilots for innovation. Magnets can accomplish those goals only if we are diligent about the selection and placement of magnets, and are especially critical of the student selection process for magnet programs. To summarize, we support the formation of a community advisory committee and most of the MSA recommendations. And of course, special concern are diversity and equity. The League pledges its support of the decisions by the superintendent and the school board that will provide the most equitable and excellent magnets possible within an equitable and excellent school system. Francis, if you'll start at that end, and I'll start at this end.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the handouts. To the discussion item, the update on the Magnet Steering Committee response to the magnet review. Dr. Hargens, if you'd like to introduce presentation with Dr. Radowski, please.
Thank you. Dr. Radowski's here this evening to give us an update on where we are with the 26 recommendations that were given to us by Magnet Schools of America. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Radowski for that update. And I will also mention that this is about a magnet system that is aligned and that works together. So Dr. Radowski.
Thank you, Dr. Hargens. Chairperson Porter, board members, Dr. Hargens, I'm very pleased to be here tonight to talk about the progress that we have made concerning the recommendations made by Magnet Schools of America. Since I last spoke to you, and I have a timeline, I have a timeline that I'll be presenting in a few minutes. We have formed a steering committee to work on the recommendations. The coordinator of options and magnets, Kathy McGinnis, and if she would stand, she's behind me. She is sort of responsible for organizing the work. And if any members of the steering committee are also here, I'd like them to stand so that we can recognize them. I believe in your board packets, we have put the names of the 29 staff members that have taken time to have this as an additional responsibility to what they are doing. With that said, I would like to talk about the rationale, the timeline, where we are, give you a status report on the district level recommendations, talk about the school level recommendations, which is a further, which will be further work, talk about a vision for our magnets and optional programs, and then what will be different for the 15-16 school year. I want to remind the board that the Magnet Schools of America said that their recommendations would take anywhere from 4 to 5 years to implement. And we just received these recommendations in the spring. We really spent our time basically getting ready for this school year based on last year's application process, and we really didn't start working on this until this fall. But I want to start with the rationale. I want to remind, and I agree with the speakers that magnets and options, there are a couple reasons why we have this, when we have these programs. When I was starting in the school district back in 1983, we had the Brown School and we had the traditional schools, and we really didn't have, quote, magnet schools. In fact, the word magnet schools was just beginning to be addressed in like the literature. People weren't sure what that meant. It was to attract students, that thing. And on April 3rd, 1983, the Board of Education passed a student assignment revision plan where we named Manual High School as a magnet school. And from there, the programs, the schools and programs just blossomed from there. But there were really two reasons why I think that we went with magnets and options. One is it's a strategy for meeting student interest, okay? Because we know if students are engaged in their schoolwork, they will do better. The research says that. So if we have programs that students are interested in and are attractive, they will apply, you know, get in, and because of that engagement, the research says that they should do better. The second is it was a strategy for like diversity. You know, the goal of our options and magnets is to strengthen diversity by making sure that all groups and all geographical areas of the county have access to our magnets and options. And so we have always, until the Hampton decision, we always made sure that the options and magnet programs were part of the diversity guidelines that the school district was using. And then when we had the Supreme Court decision in 2007, that was an opportunity again to put the magnet schools back under under our diversity guidelines. So we do have two really good reasons why we should have magnet programs and optional programs. Back in 2011, Dr. Orfield and Dr. Frankenberg, they basically gave a report to the board that had 14 recommendations. One of the recommendations was a review of the existing magnet programs. And so as we implemented the 14 recommendations that they gave us, basically around student assignment and the process around student assignment, we basically were knocking out those recommendations. And then finally, at the beginning of last year, we basically felt that we could do the review. So we contracted with the Magnet Schools of America to basically complete a review of our 59 magnet programs. And we wanted them to answer three main questions that Dr. Orfield raised. Are JCPS magnet schools diverse? Are JCPS magnet schools promoting achievement? And are these schools magnetic? Are they attractive to students and families, and especially from an equity point of view? This is the timeline. So last January, almost a year ago, we came with a contract for the magnet review. In February, the Magnet Schools of America visited districts and schools. They basically gave you a report in March. We collected public feedback on a report in April, and in June we basically shared the plan for how we were going to review review the recommendations. We also came in June with an MOU with Magnet Schools of America to do a pilot program where 4 of our schools would basically go into their magnet school certification program. And this is a long-term strategy for really doing sort of a train-the-trainer models where these schools will learn about the standards from the Magnet Schools of America, learn how to improve their programs through these standards, and then we would use these schools as basically the models for what other schools should do to basically strengthen their programs. So those 4 schools, Cane Run, Seneca, Newburgh, and Olmsted South, they just completed a visit once again, by a Magnet Schools of America representative that came here to see how they are doing on basically putting these standards in place in their schools. In August, we gave you another update on where we were, like on this review of the recommendations. And at that time, we asked to like discontinue the magnet status of 4 schools that was part of a recommendation of 10 schools that were basically struggling with their program. And those 4 schools, Rutherford, Rangeland, Jacob, and McFerrin, will not have a magnet program at their schools for the 15-16 school year. We started our steering committee work, which we have 29 members. We started that in August, and we formed the committee in August. We've had 3 meetings, and what I'd like to do now is share the progress of where we are on these committee recommendations. Now, I'm going to give this status report, and there's 26 recommendations, so basically I have these recommendations grouped in 5, and they just are the same numbers that the Magnet Schools of America did. Because you got this material in advance in your board packet, I'm not going to go through every recommendation, but I am going to highlight probably at least 1 recommendation on each of the next 5 pages, okay, as to what our work is doing. With that said, though, the very first slide that I'm going to show you on this next sequence, I'm probably going to talk about 3 recommendations because all 3 sort of have a flavor of what our work is, and I think it'll help you. But basically, what I'm going to share is I'm going to share the recommendation, I'm going to share the proposed timeline that we have, as you can see, whether it's a red, yellow, green status, and I'm colorblind, and those dots really blend in almost the same for me, okay? But I realized, I think I know which one's the green one because I have a cheat sheet down here. But when I look up there, it's really hard for me to discern it. And then sort of a progress statement of where we're at. And then the most important thing, whether you need to approve our work as we're going along, or at least this is my estimation, or my estimation of whether we need approval. And if you disagree with that recommendation, that's fine, we can change it. And if you want to look at all 26 recommendations, we could do that. But I think that some of this is basically staff work, and some of this, because of board policy, it needs to be approved by you. So that's what we tried to do. So on this first.
Bob, do you mean approve tonight, or
no,
at some point in the future?
At some point in the future. At some point in the future, and I want to explain why. And I'm going to start with number 3, because the speakers talked about this recommendation about creating a community task force, okay, of various or a steering committee of various stakeholders. Now, when I talked to the Magnet Schools of America people, when they made this recommendation, they said, well, school districts around the country, they got different forms of steering committees. They have, some do have a 50-50 blend, or some have just all staff members, and then they roll out recommendations, and then they have public input forums. Now, we used to have a magnet steering committee in this district, and I believe Chair Porter had something to do with that, and it was basically an internal committee. And I thought we would go the internal committee route for our work, with the idea that as we developed the recommendation at the appropriate time, we would get community input of the communities that were involved. So what would that community input look like? Well, depending on the recommendation, we might use the superintendent summit as a way to get community input. Or we could do something like when Dr. Orfield was here, and basically do like community forums when he developed his recommendations. Or we have existing structures already in place, such as the Ford Next Generation Learning Implementation Teams, and we might use them to bounce our recommendations off of. It just depends on the nature of the recommendation and really where we should go, like to get the input. So with that said, I'd like to go to recommendation 4, which is review and update the traditional school model and basically the traditional school guidelines, which the board has had to approve in the past. And I believe that the Magnet Schools of America people said that those guidelines had not been updated since, I believe it was 1991. So I have like Mr. Allen, the principal of Butler, chairing a committee of traditional program staff at each level, elementary, middle, and high, and they're working on doing this recommendation. And before we bring it to you in the spring, and we plan to bring it to you in the spring for approval, we are going to get input from the community on those guidelines, and then we will bring it to you for approval. So I hope that, with those 2 recommendations, I'm explaining how we're going to go. Now, do we have to do that with all the recommendations? I don't think so, but we do need to do it with definitely the recommendations that I think we will need your approval and might be of concern with certain groups. Tonight, for instance, and this is recommendation 2, clarify the purpose, mission, and goals of the Magnet program. Later on, we're going to bring you draft of a vision statement, okay, that the committee worked on. And I will tell you what the process was that we used, and we will be bringing that to you at a later time, maybe the next board meeting, if not the first one in January, in regard for like approval. Okay, so that's how we're doing. But anyways, this is the first 5 recommendations. The next 5, 6 through 10, really 6, 7, and 9 are sort of the same one, but in a way, in that it's calling for basically a review and a better articulation, as the superintendent said. It's about how do we make the program seamless with the rest of the school system. And so I believe that we need to create a process for establishing and reviewing and replicating any magnet schools. We used to have this magnet steering committee. A school would come, basically say what they wanted to do. We would have input from various departments, get a cost estimate, and then we would bring it to the board. Well, we need maybe a similar process, but we need to look at it, especially in relation to some of the school-by-school recommendations that were made by the magnet schools. So we need to create the process so we can start on number 7, which is this development of mirror magnets and replication of successful schools, because we have to figure out how do we place those so that we can serve all the students in our community. In regard to recommendations that are numbered 11 through 15, I want to talk about number 11 because this is about giving people access to the magnet schools program. The Magnet Schools of America said we needed to develop a centralized application process, and part of it has to do with we moved in student assignment to basically making all applications online. The magnet application is online, but you still have to get materials to the school, and that's with paper. And that is a barrier for some families. Okay, when you ask a parent to go and get a transcript or grades, get test scores, get recommendations, get whatever else a school might want, it's all paper, and you have to gather the paper from the various sources, and you have to go to the school. Well, we are working with our MIS department to try to standardize the process to where you know, if I apply to a school, we ought to be able to go into our databases, into our student information system, and basically pull this material. I've asked a very simple question. When we have, at least I think it's simple, if we have people wanting jobs and we have electronic recommendations, you know, like I'm being asked to be a reference, I get an email that says, well, I fill this out for like this person. Why can't we do this in the magnet application process so that if a school requires a teacher to give give a student a recommendation, you put the teacher's name down. As soon as I as a parent apply to school X, if they need a recommendation, then an email goes to that teacher and they just fill it out online and it goes to the school. The parent shouldn't have to go to 3 or 4 places to basically get paper to go take to a school. Okay, and I think that we're capable of having this in place. Once we get that in place, then I think we have to review the criteria of the schools and try to standardize that, and then if there's more seats than there are, or if there's more applications than there are seats, then we have to figure out a process on how to do that. And I think maybe a random draw of people that are qualified is basically the way to go. But this is something that has to be discussed by the committee. We have to get things in place, and then we'll bring it forward to you. In regard to the recommendations 16 through 20, I'd like to talk about number 17, because I believe that this is one of these recommendations where I'm not sure if the Magnet Schools of America people got what we are doing in terms of our career theme magnets, okay? They're talking about a career academy model. When I read about the career academy model, it really sort of is very similar to our 5-star model. And so I've asked the CTE office to basically look at that and see if there are any gaps. And I'm not sure if we'll see much change in this, but we are reviewing this particular item because we do have the 5-star. Unless there's a big change, I'm not sure that we would need your approval on this. But we want to assure that kids that are in our 5-star program, that they are getting intern and mentoring possibilities in the programs that they're in. As far as recommendations 21 through 26, I want to point out 2 here. One is well, actually 21 and 25, we're going to need your approval because this is part of the budget process. Okay, one involves a position, and one involves basically having the budget money to basically get marketing materials in multiple languages, and that's part of the budget situation. We know what our budget limitations are. And sometimes we have to have a trade-off in terms of what we can do now and what we might have to put off until maybe another year when there are things. But this will be coming up in the process where somewhere along the line it may be say, well if we can't do it and it might not come here, but then it might come here, and you might say, well we can't afford it. Okay, I'm just saying that there is some money involved in a couple of these recommendations. And then the other one is number 2022, and we are going to do that fiscal analysis. We know that the 4 schools that gave up their magnet schools, that is basically going to save the district $250,000 next year. And we want to look at all our magnet schools to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck that we can get. I want to get to the school level recommendations. You know, they did look at the 59 schools, and they did have a sheet that had comments about all 59 schools. And some were complimentary, and some were saying, well, you ought to move this program over here, and you ought to do whatever. But anyways, we are going to look at those probably starting in the spring toward next year, with the idea that we're looking at the 16-17 school year as the earliest part of doing any changes, with the exception of we want to take the manual HSU change, which they recommended moving that program from manual to another high school. We don't believe that doing that or doing any changes at manual would be in the best interest of the district, so we want to take that recommendation off the table. And we also want to take the recommendation regarding the NOS, gifted and talented, and visual and performing arts magnet programs off the table. We are also, you know, as far as the 10 schools, as I said, 4 discontinued it, and we are going to work with the other 6 schools on improving their magnet, or like looking at one of these mirror magnet concepts, like in the future. But as I said, that'll be in the 16-17 school year. So we are starting to work on a new magnet vision, and this is the draft. This actually started with, we went to our benchmark districts, we went to other districts such as Wake County and Austin, and anybody that had magnet schools, and we asked them for their magnet program vision statement. We gave these statements to our committee members. We asked our committee members to work in small groups and basically come up with what we think should be a vision statement that could start our work in terms of setting a direction and goal. They worked on it. We went, and then we had a voting process, and then we had a tweaking process, and then we had another voting process. And basically, this is the statement that the committee voted on. And this is a draft. We want you to know it. We will share this with community members, and then we will get their input, and then we can come back to you with what we heard, with a recommendation, because we believe that we need a vision statement that fits in with the Vision 2015 statement, and with the idea of achievement and like diversity. So this is our draft. And then finally, what's going to be different for 15 and 16? We hope to have a new magnet vision that'll help structure our work and then help us get to goals and other things that will help us with our professional development and help us as we become more aligned as a program. We're going to have updated traditional program guidelines. I told you about the 4 schools. We got the piloting. We do have one pilot school. One of the recommendations was to have our MST schools become STEM schools at the middle school level. So Newburgh is stepping up and piloting that next year, and we'll learn from that. And then there's better collaboration between curriculum and instruction and the magnet office. And then recommendation 23 is, we've identified exemplary models. What I'm envisioning is, by the spring, we're going to have a What Works in Magnet Schools clearinghouse kind of web page, so that people that are working in magnet schools, that they can go to a web page and basically get the latest research on, quote, magnet programs that we've identified in exemplary schools, so that they can make contact and that they can get the best information from people that have been successful. With that concludes my report, and I'll be happy to take questions.
We want to start with Ms. Duncan, come to Ms. Westland, and we're doing well on time. We are having an executive session this evening, and we do have another speaker, so I just want us to put everything out there so we know what the work is before us. Ms. Duncan first, and then Ms. Westland, and I will have some comments toward the end. Thank you.
Well, I thought the magnet review was the most confusing review that we've had of all the audits. They had so much information that it showed that they did not understand our district. But one thing they did reveal was that our magnets were magnets really kind of in name only, not compared to other districts' magnets and how they set them up. And then Dr. Orfield had said that, from when he was here, most magnets are based on lottery and get a broad cross-section of students with the interests of the magnet. And our programs weren't established to accomplish that purpose. We had, our traditional schools had a different kind of purpose behind them, and it was a kind of a separation, wanting a separation of students. And the other magnets sort of wanted that separation of our students. So our purposes were never like what Magnet Schools of America is used to looking at. So they came in and kept trying to read that into our structures, and it just, none of it fit. I mean, how did you arrive, how did we determine that 26 recommendations need to be implemented? There were so many recommendations that were off the wall. I mean, I was confused about what they thought a magnet school was here. I mean, they called our career tech programs, just like they said, Southern, Central, and Iroquois need to develop career tech programs. I mean, there were so many things in this report like that. Olmsted South, Olmsted North need to become traditional schools. If they just make them traditional schools, then suddenly that will correct all the things, and not understanding that traditional schools don't have resides area and what the impact of that would be. But there were just so many things that they said in their recommendations. The University High School movement. How did you determine which ones of those recommendations actually were realistic for us?
Well, first of all, Ms. Duncan, that's a very good question. Okay, I believe that we at least have to be respectful of the 26 recommendations, and I need to have a group of people look at them to see if there is, the confusion, or if there is some merit. So such as the one about Southern, Central, and
Iroquois.
And like Iroquois, like we believe that one probably doesn't need to go any further. But I think we need to do that with all 26, okay? And that we need to have an honest discussion among the steering committee, bring it forward within the steering committee, and then eventually report to you, such as I'm doing tonight, whether it should go forward or not. We did spend a lot of a lot of resources for the review. The biggest problem with the review was we had several snow days during that review, if you remember, and so they had to come back, and it was just, it was a fairly stressful time and a short timeline. So we have followed up with the magnet school people when we weren't quite sure about about what they were saying in the report. We think that we have the gist. They are concerned about equity, and we are concerned about equity. And I just, you know, and so we want to look at the recommendations and at least give them the honor of working on them until we think that it might not be the best way to go.
Well, I hope,
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I hope we pick out the ones, we don't just say, okay, there are 26, now we gotta
Right.
do all these 26 no
I'm-
matter what, you know, because some of them were not applicable. They just didn't make sense with us.
We want to look at okay, we're a school system, okay? We're a school system, not a system of schools. We want to make sure that what we have, that the magnet programs, schools and programs, the magnet schools and programs complement the school system, that are congruent with what we want, that are congruent with your Vision 2015, okay? And whatever vision follows 2015, that they're here to help us meet those goals, not be detrimental to those goals. And that's how we're looking at these recommendations. Okay, your 2015 document supersedes all of this work. Okay, that's why we're doing the work, is to meet the goals of 2015.
Well, and there are two parts to this magnet review. There are the 26 recommendations, and then remember there was a worksheet. So you talked about Olmsted North and South, so they took all 59 magnet schools, and then they made notes about specific schools. So there are really two parts to look at. The actual recommendations don't say anything about Olmsted North or South. It's actually in that note thing. So if you were going to hover over Jefferson County Public Schools, I think what they were looking at is, would you see a system of magnet schools that gives equal access? That's what they're talking about, the mere magnets.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency in programs. Traditional schools mean traditional schools. They have a meaning to it. And then continuity of if you start with performing arts, do you have an opportunity to finish with performing arts? So those were the big three themes. But what they did is hover over us, kind of looking to see, do we have a system that has those three components in it?
Well, I remember specifically, they said, okay, we said, if overall, what would be your very top things that you would want us to do? Remember that? They said, melt it down, 3, and they gave us their top 3 things. And one was that our magnet school should not be exiting kids. See, I don't see that in here. I mean, I'm not feeling these things that they said. And number 2 was centralization of applications. And I think the third one had to do with make more use of a lottery, you know, for schools,
right,
for the other things. But see, I'm not feeling that coming through in what we have, what we're looking at with these recommendations. And then the outside things that they didn't mention. I mean, for me, I don't understand why one magnet school or one program gets to require that you list them first choice, or a student doesn't have an opportunity to go to that school anymore. If you didn't list us first, you don't get in. That's part of that, taking that away from schools and centralizing it. I'm sure that will be the correction for that. But I know that goes on, and you know, I don't think that they didn't pick that up in their review, but that's a weakness. And it's something that we are going to need to review, just like nobody said anything about our siblings issue. And to me, in a magnet review of this nature, we need to be thinking about those issues that are important to us, that some of them they missed, not just the ones that they happened to catch, but the ones that they missed, such as those 2 areas right there, I think are big ones that parents run into and families run into. You know, I'm not feeling the thoroughness of this based on their 26 or the 26 things that we're trying to look at. So I hope in the course of this that we can add some things of our own and not just what they recommended, because they don't know us.
I think, Ms. Duncan, that I think you know me well enough that I listen to board members, and this has been duly noted, and it will be added to the work.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I just was very disappointed in the audit when we heard the report. It was very confusing. I couldn't tell when I finished the difference between what they thought a magnet school was or what they thought. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't think we had 59 magnet schools, and yet it was a magnet school review, and then we have schools that are called different things. They have magnet programs in them, and pretty soon the whole thing just got all mixed up. So I felt like weather did interfere, and I know that was a difficulty for them. But we're having to deal with the aftermath of recommendations that I feel like I'm not convinced all of them fit us. So, I want us to be careful as we go through this process, and not just because they listed it, that's what we're going to do.
Let me make sure, Ms. Duncan, I think that we've heard your concerns and about the whole process and questions that you have, and perhaps, I don't think all of that's going to be resolved this moment at this table. So I think that there's some other work that needs to be done.
Right.
And I appreciate everything that you've said tonight, and everyone has heard that. In the interest of trying to, and this is what you all get angry about, but in the interest of me having to move the meeting along, are there specific questions that you have right this minute for Dr. Radosky? And if not, I would ask that we have another opportunity for conversation about some of the concerns that you've had, that you said tonight, and additional concerns, so that we can move on. If you have specific questions, okay. If not, I would just like to move the process along, ask Ms. Westland to have an opportunity to speak as well.
And I did say my specific questions there about, are we going to have a chance to add to what this is and to take out some of those that don't fit us.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Westland.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Duncan did mention a couple things that I'm going to comment on, but I see it maybe a little bit differently in that I think the Dr. Orfield review was an excellent review. We had to do that to make sure we had an assignment system and school offerings that were really meeting the needs of the community, with diversity definitely in mind and student achievement. You said this is a 5-year process, so this report is just kind of here's some initial thoughts that you all take and run with it, right?
Yes.
A couple of concerns I wanted to, or one, really put on this list. Ms. Duncan mentioned it, and that is, and I think this advisory committee is going to be so important to get to know more about what's going on in our schools and how they're being attractive and how they're serving students, which is really the main thing, right?
Right.
Really and truly, every school in JCPS has a personality that might fit a student. Just because it's not a magnet doesn't mean it's not special. They're all special, and they all have something that families love when they get in there. But there has become, as you know, Dr. Radosky, some exclusivity to some programs. And I've been concerned over the years about exiting students, which Ms. Duncan mentioned, and I think you and I have talked about this a couple of times. So I'd ask that you put that on your list, because if a school is right for a student as far as a program or a style of learning, I think unless it's just an unusual circumstance, that school should be able to serve that student. The student's having some discipline trouble, because if they exit them, they just go back to a reside school, which is another special place that they have to deal with it or else, right?
Right.
And then accountability scores come out, and it's pretty easy to make yourself pretty exclusive, and these other schools have no choice but to deal with students who need extra help. There's always going to be students that need extra help, and they should be equitably distributed by their choice if that's possible.
Well, my observation is that when we started magnet schools and programs, it was in a much different environment in terms of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
As accountability has been ratcheted up, especially after the No Child Left Behind and some of the legislation that's followed it or regulations that followed it, it has become a much more demanding kind of place in terms of trying to attract students and, quote, trying to exit students, and we do have to do something about that.
There's a good thing about public accountability, and there's a not so good thing about that, and we can't let that be the way the only way that schools get their great scores. So this is an opportunity to include this in the mix, right?
Yes.
And look at that. So I would ask that we do that. Also, I would be for the board looking at this down the road is investing in marketing in all our schools, really. As I said, not just magnets, but all schools. But there are magnet programs that people don't know enough about.
Right.
As you know, I visited Young Elementary about a week ago, and it was a really great visit, an opportunity to see a beautiful school where the application process is a family saying, I'm interested in coming here. That's it. You know, that's a big step, but there's nothing really else involved in that. And the children are embraced, and they are exposed to so many wonderful things. And it would be a great place for many students, I believe. I'd look at it if I knew about it, if it existed when my daughter was going into elementary school. So we have to market these schools because it would be a great place for a lot of people.
Right.
So those are the two things I wanted to mention.
Mr. Brady and then Ms. Porter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things I'd like to talk about in regards to your presentation. You're talking about item number 25 or recommendation number 25, marketing materials, applications, and choice information should be provided in multiple languages. It seems to me that you could bring a bit of technology to bear on that by using Google Translate. So that's something that you may want to consider to give yourself a little bit of a leg up. It's not a foolproof system. It's not 100%, but it's something that might be able to give you a step ahead, and you might be able to utilize that.
Thank you.
So just think about that with your group. One of the questions that I get asked frequently, and I'm sure other board members do too, is that why don't we have another manual? Why don't we have another magnet high school like manual? And it's something that I'm often not sure what the answer to that would be. So it's something that, perhaps you can, and I don't need an answer now, but think about that and maybe provide an answer to that to this board a little bit later on. I too share my colleagues' concern about exiting students, especially from some of these magnet programs. It seems to me that that could be a Title IX and/or Americans with Disabilities Act violation. So that's something that we should think about in going forward with that, because we have a duty and requirement to teach everyone in our schools, and that means every school, magnet or otherwise, because it's still a public school. A couple other things regarding the application process. Again, I think that there was an issue with that being centralized. That was highlighted within the magnet school review, and I'd like to see some more attention brought on that, but also to make sure that these the guidelines and the expectations or rules are printed or at least published online somewhere. I know that that was a criticism of the review, that there was nothing that was currently written down. So in order to facilitate transparency within our district, we should definitely have that to where everyone knows what the guidelines or criteria is. That's not some mysterious process that happens behind the scenes. I also know that Member Jones has also brought up a question regarding what are your percentage chances to that, and I know Dr. Hargens had mentioned that earlier in one of our work sessions today. That's something else I think kind of falls within this particular item as well. And lastly, I don't know if this necessarily relates to the MSA, but I do know that from a, I guess a magnet-ish type of ballpark issue is that Fern Creek Traditional High School, the leadership over there is actually actively trying to remove traditional from that particular school because they don't feel it really goes into their vision and mission of their school, nor does it seem, at least in their view, that it aligns well with their 5-star standing. So that perhaps that might be something we can also touch on later on when you or your group reports back to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jones. Okay.
So I agree with some of the things that have been said. I agree with Ms. Duncan's point that the magnet review had much broader points than you have addressed in your discussion. And I agree with Member Westland that it's really important to get some marketing behind these schools so we can explain what they are. But overall, I'm really disappointed with what you brought forward from the committee. My understanding of the Magnet Schools of America review is that we brought a national group of experts in, and they looked at our system from a systemic view, and they found it wanting in some very important respects. Some of them have to do with equity, some of them had to do with transparency, some of them have to do with outcomes. And what I hear is we have a 29-person committee composed solely of people who are inside the system, and that by school year 16-17 we may make some changes. However, the sacred cows, manual, no, etc., they're not part of this anymore. That doesn't cut it for me. This is just as important a review to me as the state auditor's report, the management review, and the notion that JCPS is so unique and so different and so special from anywhere else in the world that when we say magnet, when we say, you know, that nobody else can understand how uniquely wonderful we are, given all the innovation that has gone on in this country and all the different special schools that are figuring out how to deliver different interest areas to different kinds of populations in different languages, it just, frankly, it makes me really, really disappointed. We have got to go faster and we've got to do better. First, you know, just a couple of points. I mean, 16-17 is just unacceptable. Second, taking manual completely out is unacceptable. The notion that our best school is beyond improvement is silly, and the most hard-hitting of the recommendations to me was that admission to the highly oversubscribed magnets is non-transparent. That's true in my experience, that's true in my observation, that's true in our conversations about what the algorithm is that determines student admission, and it is not right for a public sector entity to distribute a benefit that is worth more than $100,000 per student based on a non-transparent, incomprehensible set of closed decisions. There may be rules, they may be applied completely fairly, but they're not understandable and they're not public and it's not right. So I just want to call us back to me, the core number here. 48% of our students are finishing proficient or distinguished. If we've got 59 magnet programs, you know, they're clearly not as good as they can be. And I just want to call us back to a serious sense of response to what I thought was a pretty constructive report from a bunch of experts.
My only reaction, Mr. Jones, is that I probably wasn't clear about recommendation 11 about adopting a centralized process, because the rest of it there's also a reference to manual being more transparent. We are working with the manual administration. They have on their website the areas that are there. They have shared, they are developing a rubric that will be eventually publicized, and we will get transparency in the application process down there.
When? By 2017?
No, I'm hoping, I was hoping that it would be for next year, and it might still be. I just have to, I am working with them. That's where it is. Okay, I just, we have this thing where we have an application process, and it's going to be in January. okay, when it is. You know, I will try to make I will try to have something back to you about the scoring rubrics prior to that.
But it's,
okay?
that's only an illustration.
Right.
You know,
Right.
another one of the points was we don't have nearly enough STEM seats. You know,
Right.
there was no interest in attacking the HSU program. It was all about how do we create, if you got 20% of the qualified kids getting in, and Mr. Brady already asked the question, you know, if we're turning away 80% of the kids who could benefit, how do we get more of that?
Right.
Same with the traditional schools. I mean, and I don't want to sit around here
Right.
until 2016 before we, you know, before we get some
Okay.
serious planning.
Can I say one thing before you go, Diane? Sure. I just want to mention, and I appreciate your points about urgency and the need to address these things. I see a lot of people addressing lots of issues on this, and I know these things do take time. That's not not making an excuse for things to take time. It just does take time. But I want to address before I leave here the issue, Mr. Jones and others too, and Jerry Mays, I know you have a great school, but I am not going to say it's the best school because I know you serve a high-end population. A lot of them, a lot of the students that go there need extra attention, and they score highly, and you know that, right? But we need to create those opportunities across the district. We do not need another manual to cream off students and create more haves and have-nots as far as the accountability list. You'll just see, here it'll go. Few schools go this way and other schools go down this way, because not everybody is gonna achieve at the same level no matter what we do. We need to make sure everybody achieves at the highest level they possibly can and do a great job at whatever they possibly can. We have got to quit saying, this is the best school, because I'll tell you, I know that Ballard beat you all in some stuff. And there's opportunities at J-Town, at Fern Creek, at Iroquois, at Shawnee Engineering, at Shawnee, at J-Town. It is absolutely true, and we're the friggin' school board, and we should not say that. It's done. We need to have best programs at every school, and this has got to stop.
Yeah, so fair call out that there are great programs at every school, but we do have one school that gets a very high percentage of all the National Merit Scholars, and one school that does a great job of attracting the kids who are in the top 1 to 5 percentile, and when they graduate, they're still in the top 1 to 5 percentile. And that's great, but that school has to be better, and so do all the other ones. And the selection criteria for anything that's in short supply, if Shawnee's aerospace program becomes radically oversubscribed, we daggone well better have transparency about how students are chosen for it. Doesn't matter what it is. If there's a shortage and government is distributing it, it has to be transparent.
Okay, now Ms. Porter's turn. Thank you. I want to talk about this objectively, and this was an area that I worked in for a number of years, but that's not where I am now, so I have to remember where I'm sitting right now. I want to start off by saying that because we had this review, we've also had an opportunity to send staff to a national conference.
Yes.
We have people coming in to look at us. The goal is to be the best we can be.
Right.
So I think we're making some steps in that direction. So I want to start with the positives, because we have lots of positives, but we also have lots of questions in this report. And I want to support what the League of Women Voters spoke about this evening, the importance of including community in some of our committee work. Years ago, we did have an in-house committee that listened to proposals. People came to the committee, talked about why they wanted to have a magnet, how they were going to pay for it, how they were going to sustain it, and what the professional development needed to be. I understand that, but I also clearly understand the importance of community engagement as it pertains to the educational process. So I support the recommendation that came before us tonight to include some community partners as we move forward with this. And I would like some clarification, because we talk about a steering committee and then we talk about a subcommittee. So is the subcommittee, Dr. Radowski, a part of the steering committee, or are those different people that are on subcommittees?
Each subcommittee is chaired by somebody on the steering committee, and it can be made up of a couple steering committee members and a couple other staff members, or whoever the chair of the subcommittee feels can help them develop the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And I did not get the committee list, so if somebody could send that to me, I would like to receive that. I did look through my papers. I don't have to have it right this minute. But there's some other things in here that I think that are critical, and when you talk about professional development, we don't have time to wait for professional development. When it talks about putting like programs together and letting people have an opportunity to sit in the same room and talk and to receive professional development, one of the things on here was, as we talk about programs like the Montessori program, where as we bring new teachers in, what is the process so that we are providing an opportunity for training, professional development training that helps with that program to be a better program. So that's something that I think that we should look at clearly and make happen as soon as possible. We talked about saving $250 million. Is that what you said?
250,000.
Oh, I was trying to make it a little bit larger because you don't have a
I know, I wish I could get credit for that.
But if we have that money, professional development, I think, is something that we clearly need to look at. Item number 17, when it talks about the Career Academy model, and it talks about Southern, Central, and Iroquois, we need to clearly define the fact that Central has never been a part of anybody's model, that school started on its own, with its own magnet programs. It does not get the same funding anybody else does.
Right.
So again, as we talk about access and equity, it's important that we mention that, because they've never been in the same pot as everybody else. So I think that's equally important. So in my mind, the things that are concerning to me are access and opportunity, making programs understandable so that everyone knows that they have an opportunity to participate. So when we talk about English language learners and special education students, what are we doing for that? We have to have a concerted effort and a plan that we can put on the table to show that we're making that work. I'm very interested in professional development. I'm very interested in knowing about the full-time position, and I understand that it says that's a budget issue, but if we are going to be the best we're going to be, and if it requires the dollars to do that, then the board needs to hear that. So I think that there is a lot of work to be done on this. Magnet programs came to this district to offer choice.
Right.
We have done that. Can we do it better? Absolutely. Must we get on it? Absolutely. I support the magnet programs. I spent some of my life there. The exiting process has not been fair, and once upon a time, students could be exiting with no due process, and we stopped that because there was no equity with that. And when people come to the board members and say, at the community conversation, we were asked the question, how do I get my child in school X, Y, Z? We need to be able to answer that question. And we don't need to say that you have a 0.5% chance of that happening. And I think you were at the community conversation
Right.
that I was at when we got that question multiple times.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes we must give students an opportunity to be successful. We must give them an opportunity to be successful. And I have a very personal story about that this year with a student at YPass. The principal's here, not giving you all the long drawn out story, but somebody has to advocate for students that don't have the voice. And we have no right to turn students away who have the ability to be successful. That's all I have to say for now, but I look forward to more reports and more opportunities. So thank you for bringing this information to us.
And I do appreciate everyone's comments, and we will take them, and we will work with your comments to make this school district better.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Harkins, anything else?
No, we're on it.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Radowski. Ms. Haddad?
I guess I just want to say that the magnets started because we were losing population, and we wanted to find a way that we could serve all kids. And we have to serve all kids at every level. And no one school can be picked out as a guinea pig. We have to look at all of them. And I think just attacking manual is not the answer to the question, because there's only so many seats in a school, at any school. And I've had parents call me about that they call me about other schools. I get more calls about traditional schools because it's lottery and we can't get them in there. And the only way you could do that would be to close another school to open more traditional schools. And I'm not sure anybody wants their school closed. But I think we need to look at every school, make it all special. And the ones that are working, let's give them credit for working. You know, they talk about some of those schools exiting kids, well, other schools do it too, do suspension. They get rid of them and send them to alternative schools. So there's a lot of different things that go on that need to be looked at. So I appreciate the work, and it's not easy because we've been looking at it for many years, and I've been looking at it many years. We've been to court looking at it many years, and you're never going to make everybody happy. And you can't ever guarantee anybody anything, because your neighborhood school could be busy and full, and you couldn't get in your neighborhood school either. So, you know, there aren't any guarantees. I know there's some who feel like they should be, but there aren't. And then when they get there, they don't like it, and they want you to put somebody else out in another school. So I've ridden this ride for a long time. So I appreciate your work, and it's not easy. And I appreciate all the people giving the time to it, because it does take time. And I think we have a really great school system. I think when 45% of your parents want choice, that's saying a whole lot about the system. And I think we're trying to address the growth. We have growth. So there are a lot of things we're trying to address. We're trying to keep siblings together. We're trying to do a lot of different things. So good luck on your journey. And because it is quite a journey, and it is very personal. When you're talking about people's kids, it's very, very personal. And we need to help every kid, make every kid successful. And we are trying to do that. So, you know, we hear cases. We'll hear a case of, I didn't get this and I didn't get that. But I have to say the schools are doing a good job. And I say in particular that my children and grandchildren went to Manual. They got a good education. And they have a lot of kids. They have the handicapped kids in there. Now, I don't see that they're being put out of those schools. So I don't think not to be put out just for any reason. But like I said, there are other schools, they put them out when they suspend them and send them to alternative schools. So let's keep it in perspective. Thanks.
Is there a motion to receive the update? Mr. Brady, second. Ms. Haddad, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Radowski. We're now moving to the 2014-15 Board of Education discussion agenda planning calendar. Any comments on the planning calendar? Ms. Duncan.
Program reviews. I still didn't see if we're going to ever hear about program reviews.
Okay, anything else on the planning calendar? Is there a motion to receive the planning calendar? Ms. Haddad, second. Ms. Duncan, all those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to board reports and requests. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to make one quick shout out to the students at YPass. This past week we had an opportunity, as some of us here on the board had an opportunity to see YPass's production of Hairspray. And if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, there are still 7 more times for you to see that over the next 2 weeks or so. So I do highly encourage you to go out and see it. I brought my 2 young sons to see it. And when I told them that the character of Edna Turnblad was a male actor, blew their mind. So, and so much so that we actually had to prove it to them. They didn't believe us, and we had to show them in the program. But it was a really fantastic performance, and again, it was a really high-quality performance, and I do recommend everyone, if you have a chance, go out and check it out. And I want to say thank you to the principal, Mays, and also Assistant Principal Crady for inviting us at the board. And I certainly had a great time. I think I can probably speak on some of your all's behalf on that as well. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Haddad. And then Ms. Duncan.
I heard that Chris could play the trumpet, and he was going to play for us one night. I mean, that was the rumor. It was going
But not tonight.
Was it
Trombone.
Trombone. Oh, excuse me.
But not tonight.
No.
Okay. Ms. Duncan?
Well, outstanding play production. I know Georgette Clyer was the director, and Tim Murner was the orchestra conductor and put the music together. It was just another amazing performance by Youth Performing Arts School. I have a request, and that's on the Equity Council. I just need to know who is going to be in charge of the Equity Council and when that might be meeting.
Anything else? Is that all? Okay. Anybody else? Quickly, I want to say congratulations to the YPass production. It was an outstanding production. Very talented young people that were there, and a great performance. Packed house. It was sold out. Also wanted to talk about the fact that on Saturday at the Urban League there was an ACT boot camp getting young people ready to take the ACT, and they walked and they came on TARC, and the session was to be over at 12 noon, and they were still there at 1:15, 1:30. They did not want to leave because they wanted that opportunity. So I want to give a shout out that was successful. The week before there was another session and the room was packed on students filling out their college applications. Also on Saturday there was a session for the Zones of Hope for folks to give a report out of what's going on in the 4 zones of hope, and that's important to mention because each of our street academies lies in one of those zones of hope, in that we have programs at Rangeland, Bick, Wheatley, Roosevelt, Perry. So just wanted to say that that happened on Saturday. As it pertains to request, I'd like a copy of all the suspension data. Thank you, Dr. Hargens, for sharing the information with us tonight of what was going well, but I'd like to see it by school and the demographics by school to see how we are really doing. And then I've been asked twice by parents about what is happening with the National Merit Exam Test. There's a specific scholarship opportunity called the National Achievement Scholarship that is supposed to be going away. So if someone could tell us what is going to happen with that, it would be helpful for the board to know. This is part of the National Merit Scholarship. During the PSAT, students identified themselves and they qualify what used to be the National Achievement Scholarship. Those scholarships are in place for minority students, and it has been said to some parents that that whole opportunity is going away. So if we could get some additional information about that, I would appreciate it very much. That takes care of my reports and requests. Are there any others? We have one additional person to address the board this evening, Mr. Shelby Lanier. Mr. Lanier, welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the board. At the end of 2.5 minutes, the bell will sound once. Then you will have 30 seconds to finish your statement. At the end of 3 minutes, the bell will sound twice, indicating that your time is up. Thank you, Mr. Lanier, for being here tonight.
When does it start? Okay.
It starts right now.
Please accept this audio tape, duplicate it for all members of the board and the superintendent. Listen to what is being said on this tape. Listen and hear the lies, distortions, and deception spoken about our JCPS, our children, and our grandchildren, and myself. I believe most of you who graduated went on to college just as I did. Graduated, and at least 2 of you present at this evening that I know taught in the school system, so did I. Every one of us pay for this public school system because we pay property tax, and we can and do vote for the board members, the mayor, the Metro Council members, the governor, and our state representatives. The person you hear on this tape cannot vote for any of you or any of our selected and elected officials. The person that you hear on this tape does not pay 1 single dime for our public schools, and that is the truth. What kind of man, call yourself man of God, would tell our children, parents, the untruths and outright lies that you will hear on this tape. Lies about you, our superintendent, our chairperson. I don't care what you call yourself, be it pastor, reverend, bishop, PhD, doctor of divinity, etc. The creator that I believe in communicated to all of us that thou, meaning you and me, our children, should not lie, distort, and deceive. The person on this tape even tells lies about the reason for the temporary closing of the schools in Ferguson, Missouri. Listen to what he says. In concluding, allow me to share this with you. On October the 16th of this year, I was inducted into the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame, a proud supporter of this Jefferson County public school system, a product of it, a recipient of the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame because of it. Thanksgiving to all of you for what you did and for what you are doing now. Take this tape very serious because it is serious. I want to say this also on behalf of Sammy Moore, which I had the privilege of participating in athletics at Central High School. And Sammy and I can tell you the legendary thing about Sammy Moore, and I said it to everybody in the state. He was the best left-hand basketball player in this state besides Sleepy Smith, and Sleepy was from up there in another part of the state, but we all went to schools together. Me and Sleepy went to Jackson Junior High School, then he went on up to Lincoln Institute.
And Mr.
Sammy
Lanier,
was essential. So again, I want to give this to you and ask that you duplicate it. I just didn't have money at the time. Now this was on today, this morning.
okay, thank you.
Would you do that and make sure that everybody gets a copy?
Yes, sir. Thank you for being here tonight. There is the board will go into executive session. It's necessary that the Board of Education recess and reconvene in executive session at this time. Do I have a motion that the Board of Education enter into executive session for the purpose of discussions relating to proposed or pending litigation pursuant to KRS 61.8101C of the Open Meetings Act? Is there a motion? Mr. Hathaway, second. Mr. Jones, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And we're going to this